All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to Marquette University Law School, Eckstein Hall. I'm Mike Goucher. This is On the Issues at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. This is our continuing series of conversations with news and policymakers. People are doing interesting, important work in this region and beyond. And today we are joined by the representative from Wisconsin's 1st Congressional District, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, the former vice presidential candidate, Paul Ryan. Why won't you give him a warm welcome to Marquette Law School?
Thanks.
We've got a lot to talk about today. I want to spend some time talking about his new role in Congress, chair of the really important committee, House Ways and Means Committee. And I know you like to talk policy, and we will talk policy, but I always like to begin with a little politics, which he hates. But he's used to it by now, so.
We know each other pretty well by now.
Yeah, we do, so he's not terribly surprised by this question. But there are probably a lot of people in this room, I mean, they may have read at council why you're not running for president. You're one of the handful of Republicans not running for president.
I thought that would be a unique thing to do.
Something new and different, yeah. Right. But tell people in this room, why not?
Well, first of all, good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. Yeah.
Thanks for having me back. This is so much nicer than the Sensenbrenner Hall, and I love pointing that out to my colleague from the 5th Congressional District. Jim and I have a good relationship. I jab him, but this is beautiful. This is just, Marquette Law School is really arriving. And it's that and the Aspen Center out in D.C., which I'm very involved in, the board, and it's we have a lot of interns. Marquette is really making an impact outside of Wisconsin, and I just hope people who are fans of Marquette just realize that those of us who didn't go here are fans of it as well. And it is a school that has made an enormous impact, and it's doing a great job. And so thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Why didn't I run for president? That's your question?
Sure.
It was an evolution of thinking over the last 2 years between Jana and myself, knowing what opportunities I had in front of me, the ages of our children, 10, 11, and our 12-year-old just turned 13 last week, and knowing I could make an enormous difference by being chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, the issues I care a great deal about that I think have an enormous impact on everything. It's the committee in charge of our tax laws, our health care laws, most of our retirement laws, our trade laws, and our welfare laws. So if you care about the issues of poverty, if you care about economic growth, international competitiveness, if you care about jobs and trade, and if you care about what I do, patient-centered health care and entitlement reform, which is the debt crisis, being chair of this committee is extremely valuable, and you can make a huge difference while living in Janesville, Wisconsin, being home every weekend. We went to Cascade Mountain on Saturday, and I had 2 basketball games yesterday. They grow up once, and I can't tell you how many times I've had people who, look like you guys do, tell me, I wish I spent more time with my kids. I don't want to be one of those people with those kinds of regrets.
It's important. Your dad, as you wrote
I lost my dad when I was young. Yeah, and so I guess I'm a little extra sensitive to that point, I suppose. But also, I just knew I could make a huge difference, and I think that that's fine. And I'm 45 years old. It's not like I'm in a hurry. I can always do these things later if I want to. So I'm just not one of those people who thinks it's now or never.
Did the fact that Mitt Romney gave very serious consideration to running again have anything to do with your decision?
I'd already made up my mind, and he knew where my mind was, and he and I still talk quite a bit. I had already made up my mind late last year. Basically, when I decided to pursue Ways and Means, and I was pretty confident I was going to get the job, I knew I couldn't ask my colleagues to make me chair of this committee, only then to go to New Hampshire and Iowa and South Carolina and do half the job. It's a job that's very important. It's a full-time job that has a lot of work on its plate. We could probably get into that in just the next year. And so I couldn't ask my colleagues to give me this chairmanship and then phone it in. So I knew back then in November that was basically when I made the decision. And then just the family conversation over the Christmas holidays, we sort of punctuated the decision. And then I decided, instead of trying to fan all this speculation, which a lot of people like to do, I just wanted to get rid of all this speculation and just make my announcement early, which is January 7th or 8th I did.
You said that had Mitt Romney run, that you would have endorsed him.
Yeah.
You think very highly of him, think would have been a good president. And then I saw you on Meet the Press, and of course, Chuck Todd asked you immediately. So does that free you up now to endorse
Right.
Scott Walker?
So I actually,
should he be a candidate?
Right. So during this deliberation, I talked to another Wisconsinite, Reince Priebus, who is chair of the National Committee, who asked me to chair the General Election Fund, which is basically getting ready for the nominee. And because of my unique experiences from having been on the ticket, Reince basically said, well, if you're not going to run for president, would you please help get ready for the nominee? Get the party into the kind of shape it needs to be to prepare for the nominee when that person arrives. And so I agreed over the holiday time to chair that. That requires neutrality, because what you have to do is get support from everybody's supporters. Scott Walker's supporters, Chris Christie's supporters, Jeb Bush's supporters. And what I learned in 2012 is you have to be very prepared for your general election, and the person who's seeking the nomination can't do all that preparation at the last minute. So just imagine what's going to happen. You've got, I don't know, a dozen people running for president, focusing on their primaries. You know, Scott's going to be focusing on Iowa and New Hampshire, should Scott run. Everybody else, they're not going to be focusing on the general election, which, believe me, is a real sprint. Somebody needs to focus on that. So that's what the Republican National Committee needs to focus on, and I'm going to help manage that effort. We're moving the convention up so that the general election lasted a little bit longer than basically a blink of the eye, because it starts once the conventions happen, then it goes. And so I decided to try and make a more positive difference and make sure that the nominee is really ready. Because what happened was Mitt came out of the primary in May, cash-strapped. It was actually the Wisconsin primary that he won that basically sealed up the nomination for him. But he came out of that primary, you know, limping after having a very difficult primary, no money, and he didn't get the general election coordinated funds. He didn't get the party coordinated plan until August, when the convention was. And so for May, June, July, and 3 weeks in August, he couldn't defend himself against all those attacks that were coming. And so what happened was the incumbent president was able to, you know, really hit him hard with defining ads in battleground states such as this, and he didn't get his general election coordinated money, which is very important to be able to run your campaign. And so we needed to fix that, and we have a solution to that, and I'm helping put that solution into place. And so that's a long way of answering. Yeah. That's why I'm staying neutral in this, because I want to make sure that we're in better position to win the general election without the kind of deficiencies we had this last time.
Real briefly, do you like the idea of a shorter primary season and fewer debates? Is that good?
I do, because I think what happened was, I mean, you don't want to have too few, but you want to have the right amount, right? It's a balance. There are 23 debates. It was a traveling circus, you know, and so what it ended up doing was having Republicans just keep attacking each other, which was to the benefit of the incumbent. So I think having 7 or 8 debates, which is what we're going to have, a truncated time, means you can better focus your campaign. And an earlier convention means you can better focus your campaign on winning the general election. Because if you have just a 3-month sprint, it's very hard to get the campaign in the proper kind of focus. And so I think Reince basically inherited a flawed system. I'm not saying that that's the only reason we lost, but I think it was one of the contributing factors to make us less competitive. And I think we've addressed a lot of those factors now.
Should Governor Walker run, you have any advice for him based on your experience?
I've got lots of advice for him. I'll let him know what that is. Yeah, no, I learned a lot about these things. First of all, have fun. It is a pleasant experience.
Is it a pleasant experience?
Yeah. It is. Not always, but it is, actually. The reason what makes it fun is you get to meet people all around the country who care so much about their country, and I wish we could do more, but I'd like to have a big debate in this country about, you know, what direction do we want to take. I would love the chance of laying in front of the country this path or that path. And here's exactly what it looks like, and here's exactly what it looks like, and here's what we will do. And if you give us permission, you know, electing us, then hold us to accountable so that we can do this. That's the kind of election I want to have. That's the kind of clarifying election we need to have. because we're going down the path to a debt crisis. Our foreign policy, I can go on and on about the issues. They are in great need of getting fixed. And you need to have a clarifying election with a mandate in order to really fix these things, instead of ambling along like we are right now, where we basically get the bare minimum. We're governing at a low common denominator right now, and we need to be able to do much, much, much better than this if we're going to get ahead of our problems.
So let's talk about some of the challenges facing America. When you made the decision not to run, you wrote a piece that was in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and sort of laying out what that Republican vision is. And you said the reason why you want to be the chair of House Ways and Means Committee is you're concerned about the future of the economy and of the country.
Right.
Now, let me just play devil's advocate here. 58 months in a row of private sector job growth. Last 3 months, best private sector job growth in 17 years. Do you really think that we're on the verge of the very negative vision that you just discussed?
I do.
Why?
Because trend growth. So let's go even more macro. We are growing below 3% a year. You need to get above 3% growth to really kind of get people back into the economy. We have tens of millions of Americans, adults, who aren't even being counted in these unemployment statistics. So if we had what we call the labor participation rates that were really high, and we had those kinds of rates, it'd look really good.
So you look at labor participation, what, 63%?
Yeah, so we're back to 1981 levels, basically, around that area. And so when you got tens of millions of people who are able-bodied, who aren't looking for work, who aren't working, who aren't in school getting trained for work, they're just not being counted, it's a real problem. That plus the fact is we are downgrading our goals for the economy, and I think that's a real problem. That plus the fact that income mobility is slowing down. And I think we need to do a lot more to get income mobility up, to restore the notion of upward mobility, to restore the faith in the American idea. More than half of the people in some surveys don't think the American dream is there for their kids. So you're getting a sense of cynicism, but more importantly, the statistics are bearing it out, which is there's so much more we need to do to get people out of poverty, to get people on lives of upward mobility, and to get this economy growing at the pace it needs to grow to get income growth up. Wages have stagnated quite a bit for middle-income people. And so in order to get those wages going up, you need to get faster growth than what we've had. We cannot accept as a new normal, 2.6, 2.7% economic growth, because then we will not have the kind of wage growth we need. We will not have the kind of economic dynamism you need to get people out of poverty and to get new businesses created. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot we can do. And the good news is, you get the basics right, I think we'll be okay. But if we miss this moment, say the next half a dozen years, in fixing these big problems, then we're in managed decline mode. Then we are sort of like Europe, welfare states where we have millions of people who are not meeting their potential, people stuck in poverty, and we're managing our decline because we have a debt crisis where our debt has gotten so big, our interest payments have gotten so large that we really are stuck in a slog. And that's what I worry we're headed into. And I think we need to break out of that.
There's some people who look at the deficit right now and they say, well, the deficit's come down. It's moving in the right direction.
And it's going right back up.
So you think this is temporary?
It is temporary. No, I don't think it is temporary, because look at the forecast, the CBO, OMB. What they show us is, and this isn't really a Republican-Democrat thing, deficits have gone down because we're down from the huge, extraordinary trillion-dollar deficits of the recession. Millions of people out of work, millions of people on what we call stabilizer programs like unemployment, and that's gone down. But now we see in a few years the deficit's going back up to trillion-dollar territory, and that's being pushed up by demographics. The issue is we're going to nearly 80 million retirees in this country from approximately 40 million retirees. So you have something like a 90% increase in the retirement population of this country, but only about a 20% increase in the working population of this country, people following them into the workforce. And the problem with that from a fiscal and economic standpoint is most of the programs the government has that are very important are pay-as-you-go programs, Medicare, Social Security. Current taxpayers pay current taxes for current beneficiaries. I pay my FICA taxes for my mom's Medicare and Social Security. Works out great if your demographics are stable, but they're not. So for folks who had babies for the baby boomers, people who had babies in the 50s and 60s, they did a great job. They had a lot of them, but our birth rates have declined since then. So we're basically doubling the amount of retirees, but we're not doubling the amount of workers coming into the workforce to pay the taxes to pay for their benefits. And you combine that with the fact that these benefits grow like health inflation, 6 to 8% a year, and that compounds away from us. And so structurally into our system, we have big, massive trillion-dollar deficits and a debt that gets catastrophically high. We see it coming. It's the most predictable economic crisis we've ever had in this country. And so the argument I make is let's get ahead of it. I mean, we know what's going to happen. We know it's coming. The sooner we get on top of these problems, the better off everybody's going to be. The more we can guarantee that a person in or near retirement sees no changes, and the more we can guarantee that a person who is younger, like we are, that we have time to prepare for the reforms and the changes that are necessary so that these benefits are there for us when we retire. And waiting and kicking the can and doing nothing simply means it gets much, much bigger. It gets much worse. It means the solutions are much uglier, and that's what I want to avoid.
You use the term envy economics to describe President Obama's approach to job growth, to wealth creation in this country. What do you mean by that?
I think it's a political view and a philosophy and an economic doctrine that seeks more of a government-controlled economy, which divides people based on class and income. And I don't think that's who we are or who we ought to be. I think this is a country of optimistic, aspirational, ambitious people, and our policies ought to reflect that. And so when you try to play on these fears of envy or anxiety, it can make for very powerful, emotional, political hot buttons to push. It ends up with bad economics, I think. What it does is it slows down economic growth. It reduces risk-taking or saving and investment, which is necessary to creating jobs, to creating wealth. And I also think the view, and I think it derives from a view that it sees sort of the pie of life or the pie of the economy as some fixed thing. There's only so much money in the economy, and therefore the government needs to decide how to more equitably distribute the money, when that's really not the way the world works. Let's grow the pie. Let's grow it for everybody. Oh, by the way, there is rigging of the rules. There are powerful special interests and people who are trying to rig the rules for their benefit. I call that cronyism. Both parties do it. So why don't we go after that? Let's go after a cronyism, which today you see powerful interests, which is whether it's big government and big businesses joining in a common cause to rig the rules with regulations or preferences or favorabilities to try and deny other would-be competitors, to erect barriers to entry. Let's go after that and have true free enterprise economics where everyone's invited to participate in the economy. Nobody has any special deals, and it's the same rules for everybody. That, to me, means if someone is successful through earning it through merit, that's a good thing. We want to reward that. We're happy about that. And we don't want to have a political dialogue that casts aspersions or envy toward that. We talk about Culver's all the time. I just drove by a Culver's. Right? Culver's is a cool deal. It's a cool story. Kurt and Craig Culver. They started with an A&W restaurant over there at Sauk City. It was their mom and dad's A&W, and now it's this great thing that we're all proud about to have in Wisconsin. They have them all over Texas now. It's exciting. We're happy, proud of that. I'm not jealous of Kurt Culver. I don't envy him. I'm proud of him. Look at all the jobs that he's created. Look at all these franchises he's created. That, to me, is a good thing. But if Kurt Culver would ever come to me and say, you know what? Give me this regulation that makes it harder for McDonald's to do their business. Give me this preference that makes it harder for Taco Bell to locate or something like that to protect my franchise. That is where we need to draw the line. I'm just making this up. Kurt Culver's never said any of this to me, but that's where you draw the line and say, no, you go compete, with anybody so that tomorrow's Kurt Culver, who's got a single restaurant and a single idea in some street corner in some small town in Wisconsin, can have an equal shot at success. That, to me, is the kind of economics we need.
So let me pick up on something you said earlier. You said we have this window of opportunity. We've got about 6 years, so there's some urgency. But that requires Republicans and Democrats to work together.
It does.
And I would bet that there are an awful lot of people in this room who believe that Washington is dysfunctional, that it's broken, that you have a president who proposes policy that will never be approved by the Republican-controlled Congress. You have Republicans who pass legislation they know the president will veto. People are, I think, a little skeptical of the ability to get things done, and yet you said the other day you believe, as the new chair of House Ways and Means Committee, that there are a lot of things you can do with the Obama administration, such as. Why do you believe that?
This is one of the reasons why I decided to pull myself out of the presidential race as quickly as possible so that I could just focus on doing this. Because I really do believe this is necessary just to heal our system. Because if you're out there seeking a political office, then you're going to be thinking politically. I'd say a couple of things. There are basically two things you'll see us do over the next year. You'll see us trying to find common ground and passing things in a law that we think make a positive difference in people's lives and the economy. Trade, tax, there are a number of other things. And then we just fundamentally disagree with the president on a lot of things. I just kind of describe a philosophical disagreement. And then we will amplify those disagreements by showing how we would do things differently. And I don't think these are mutually exclusive goals or tracks. So take healthcare, for example. You're about to witness, I would say, a big debate about healthcare. And I think if the court goes the way we suspect it will go in June, you'll see Obamacare kind of re-litigated. It's here in Wisconsin as well, because we're a federal exchange state. So you'll see differences of opinion on that. That doesn't mean we have to fight on everything. So for instance, trade. The president's negotiating two massive trade agreements, Europe and Asia, not China, but 11 other Asian countries, that get them to live by our standards, trade standards, and lower barriers to our exports and give us access to their markets. If we can get a good agreement, this is really good for us. It's really good for Wisconsin. Manufacturing and agriculture. We make and grow things here. Yet a lot of these economies are much more closed to our exports than we are to theirs. So this is something I think the president's on the right track and the right path on, so we're going to help him try and pass this. That's a big collaboration, and that can create a lot of jobs.
So that's fast-track negotiating
authority. Trade promotion authority is that, but also the agreement itself, which we think trade promotion authority, which gets Congress involved early on. I'm negotiating with Ron Wyden right now while we speak how to do this. He's the Democrat in the Senate, along with Orrin Hatch, who's my counterpart. And that says, let's get Congress involved in these trade agreements early on, give the administration guidelines on what we expect these agreements to contain, and in exchange, consult with us, give us transparency and accountability, and then we'll take an up or down vote on the agreement, so that you can go get an agreement. I'm in the middle of talking with the Japanese on access to their agricultural markets. So we can get an agreement that they know that if they agree to, that we will consider the whole agreement up or down. If the Japanese, this is the biggest, the Japanese are the ones that are one of the more challenging aspects of this. If they think that the president's negotiating an agreement with them, and he says he'll commit to this course of action that could be undone, in a month by Congress, then why would they agree to it? So we think to get the best agreement possible, we need trade promotion authority, no matter who the president is. They've had it since FDR. And we think it gives us a better chance of getting a better agreement because 96% of the world's consumers, they don't live in this country. They live in other countries. And if you're a mature economy like ours, you need to export. You need to make things here, sell things overseas. Export jobs pay on average 18% more. 1 in 5 jobs in America is tied to exports. That's the kind of economy we are. So we need to keep knocking down barriers so we can sell more things to these countries. More to the point, since 2000, in Asia, there have been 84 trade agreements between various countries. We're a part of 2 of them. So our competitors, whether it's the Chinese or the Indians or Europe, Canadians, they're going out there and getting better agreements between their 2 countries and freezing us out. So we can't sell as many things. We can't sell as many Harleys or Johnson Controls, or Rockwell. I mean, I can just look around here and see all these jobs. Many of them are tied to exports. So I think President Obama's on the right track here. So we're going to try and help him see this thing through.
You got a tough sales job ahead of you there because there are a lot of Democrats who are skeptical of this, and there are a fair number of Republicans who are not necessarily anxious to move forward with that. How are you going to sell it to them?
Yeah, so look, again, Some people don't like the idea of giving this president this authority. It's not Congress giving the president authority. It's basically Congress asserting its authority. That's what the misconception of TPA is. It's Congress saying, here's what it needs to look like if you're going to get our vote. And by the way, remember, we get the final say-so. So I see it as Congress asserting our authority early in the process. There's nothing to stop the president from going out and negotiating an agreement and just bringing it to Congress. He can do that. But that means we could just kill it at the end. So we need to assert ourselves early in the process, and that's what this is. And so, yes, there are some who don't like giving this president this kind of negotiating leverage. Tax reform is one other area we're going to explore. We want to reform it for everybody, individuals and families and businesses. The White House says they are only really willing to work on businesses. So we're going to have to see if we can find a way of making that work. For us, small businesses is the key to it. 90% of our businesses in Wisconsin, they're not corporations. You know, the ones I just mentioned, those are corporations. The Menominee Valley is probably most of the corporations in Wisconsin. 90% of our businesses are what we call pass-throughs, like subchapter S corporations or partnerships. They file their taxes as individuals, as people. So they're not taxed as corporations. So for us, you have to deal with that fact. If you want to help corporations, you have to help small businesses also. And so there's an area where we're going to be talking with the administration to get common ground to see if we can do so. But I think we should, because we have companies leaving, you know, Burger King, Walgreens almost did. We have $2 trillion of capital of our companies that's parked overseas that can't come back into this country for reinvestment because of our tax laws. So there are a lot of issues. Medicare. Physicians are getting cut 21.2% at the end of March. And we think physicians will just leave the Medicare program if that happens. So on a bipartisan basis, we're going to have to find a solution to that. You know, I'm looking at the Marquette interchange. You know, you got the zoo that's going. You know, we've got, by the way, there are other roads in this state besides just Milwaukee. You know,
Really?
Yeah, a lot of Milwaukee people talk about Milwaukee, but we have infrastructure needs, and the Highway Trust Fund goes bankrupt at the end of May. So that's going to require a bipartisan solution. So I think that there are areas where we have to work together just to make things work, just to keep the economy moving, stop brinksmanship, and then where we think the administration just is going in the wrong direction, we think we ought to show who we are, what we believe, and how we would do things differently, and show that contrast.
You know, it's interesting. I hear more and more Republicans talking about issues like income inequality. You put it in, I think, different terms about social mobility. You came out with something last summer dealing with the subject of poverty, and we're going to get into that here. But I want to ask you the first question. Do you think that the American public believes that the Republican Party is sincerely concerned about the wage gap, the inequality issues? Do you think that that's a tough sell for your party?
You know, I don't really worry about how our marketing department's doing. I worry about whether we're making a difference.
You've got to win elections.
Got to win elections, but I worry. But look, I'm maybe a little bit different on this. I think the best way to win elections is put out good ideas, fight for ideas, and do a good job of trying to describe your ideas, and describe what it is you're trying to achieve. And I think we've done poorly on that lately. But I don't spend my time, you know, doing polls and focus groups to see if people think we're better. I would rather come up with ideas that fix a problem, show a solution, build a coalition, try to get it passed, and show it making a difference. And so that's what I worry about. So I basically spent the last 2 years looking at all our poverty programs. The federal government spends almost $1 trillion, just the federal government, of federal taxpayer money trying to fight poverty. And we haven't moved the needle on it. And if you take a look at what's happening, we have all of these programs, all with good intentions, but they're not succeeding. Some are not at all, and some are just, we don't even measure. That's the other thing, is we're not measuring. So what I'm trying to do, I have a bill with Patty Murray, a Democrat, to begin measuring these things, the effectiveness of these ideas and these programs, because all we've been doing for this 50th war on poverty has been measuring our success based on inputs. How many people do we have on programs? How many programs do we have? How much money are we spending on these programs? Instead of measuring on outcomes, you know, how many people are we getting out of poverty? How many people are on their own and and on their way in life. How many bridges out of poverty have been successfully built and have been successfully crossed? We don't measure that. So what we're trying to do is reorient our thinking and our aspirations to measure based on outcomes. And if you think like that, and then look at all our poverty programs, they need a reworking. They need to be retooled. And so I proposed a pretty big overhaul of retooling these things last summer, not to suggest that I got it all figured out. Nobody does. But to get the conversation going so that we can hopefully at the end of this conversation start making a difference. And that's what I intend on doing in this committee, because this committee is in charge of a lot of this law, this part of the government.
Let's walk through some of
Sure.
your ideas. You've talked about expanding the earned income tax credit. Now, that seems to be something that some Democrats find appealing.
It was an area I thought there was a chance of bipartisan agreement. There is. Just for conservatives in the audience, this was originally a Milton Friedman idea. He called it negative income tax. And the idea here is to always make work pay. So it is a kind of welfare reform that says to get it, you got to work. And what it does is, I wish I had charts. I kind of get a little too charted up on this stuff. But if you pile up all these federal benefits, you find that it's created what I call a poverty trap, where a person is getting a certain number of benefits, and then if they go to work, they lose more benefits than they gain in getting a paycheck. So it's a disincentive to work. And so we have created this enormous disincentive to become upwardly mobile for income mobility. We're keeping people stuck where they are, and that's a disservice to them. They're not sharing their talents with us in the economy, and they're not reaching their potential. They're kind of giving up hope in many cases. And so what the earned income tax does is it tries to smooth that out and make it more attractive to go to work. It tries to pull people from this pool of population that is not working, that is on government assistance, into the workforce. And so we're also going to work on trying to figure out, and that's what this opportunity grant that I put out, the whole purpose of that is to, we call it the marginal income tax rate, to lower these barriers and disincentives to go to the workforce. And you need to do that because people just are rational. They'll make reasonable decisions. If I'm going to lose all my child care benefits, and I lose more in doing that by going to work, why go to work? We need to fix this so that it always pays to work, it always makes sense, and our system is oriented on outcomes, getting a person from where they are to where they want to be. And that means you have to customize. That means you have to break up monopolies. That means you have to give states and localities the ability to experiment a little bit to figure out what works best.
So you take the money and you give it in a block grant, correct?
Well, I do.
The 11 federal programs and
Technically, yes, but what critics say is, that means you're just give the money and don't even think about it. No. We're saying it has to go to the poor. You can't take your money and spend it on roads or bridges or building some stadium. It has to go to the poor, and you have to give people choices. You can't have just one government monopoly provider like the county welfare agency. You've got to give people in need choices of where to go to get their services. And that means you open up the entire service provider system to, Catholic Charities, Lutheran Social Services. We have America Works here in Milwaukee that's pretty good. They really focus on getting people the job training they need, the job they need. And so break up the welfare monopoly so that you can focus on more services that people can get to customize their benefits. And you got to measure, test results. And we have to set up metrics so we can measure, is this working? And then the providers that are good, you stick with, and the providers that are bad, you don't. And then you learn as you go and you improve. We did welfare reform in 1996, but it reformed just one program. We call it TANF now. Well, there are dozens and dozens of other programs that were never, ever reformed that have sort of taken place of the old system. And that's why we need to do another round of welfare reform. That reduced child poverty. That took especially single moms and got them into the workforce and got them better earnings. And so we learned some good lessons from that, particularly here in Wisconsin. And I think we need to reapply some of those lessons to the rest of the welfare space because, again, people are stuck. And then, by the way, you have to have a faster growing economy growing faster than 3%. to create the kinds of opportunities, the kind of wage growth that you need to be able to have these kinds of opportunities that people can go to. And that's why I think it's unacceptable to be settling for this kind of slow growth that we have.
You know, when you start talking about poverty and what do you do, it can be an explosive conversation.
Yeah, I've learned
I mean, it's politically risky. I mean, you ran into that right off the bat. You made some comments. Some people thought there was a racial connotation to the comments. Does that make this subject or topic?
You know, there were none whatsoever, of course, but I think there's a lot of sensitivities. You got to do your best to try and be as clear as you can what you're trying to achieve, but don't worry about these day-to-day conflicts. I think this is one thing where I think Republicans and conservatives have a lot to offer. We have a lot of energy and a lot of ideas and really sound principles to bring to this space that can make a huge difference in people's lives. Some people don't like that conversation. Some people don't like that, but this is the kind of public policy conversation we ought to have. Look, we're sitting here in Milwaukee where we have school choice. School choice came to Milwaukee, back when Polly Williams and, everybody knows, how it all got started here, and the Mitchells, and, I mean, just pretty impressive. And it's, Howard Fuller. I mean, Howard Fuller's an icon in the school choice movement. And it was strange bedfellows. It was Democrats, Republicans, liberals, and conservatives. Point is, it helped get kids out of poverty. It helped get kids out of failing schools. It was really successful. Controversial, I get that, but very successful. It's that kind of enthusiasm, these kinds of principles that I want to bring to play in the rest of the space so that we can focus on outcomes. And I think that that's an area that is in dire need of reform, because I really do believe that there are a lot of people who don't think that this sense of an American idea is as lasting as it used to be. The condition of your birth doesn't determine the outcome of your life in this country. We're getting more stasis. We're getting more stagnant. And I worry people are buying into this less. And that's because we have a lot of people stuck in poverty. That's because we don't have as much income mobility. Our economy hasn't been growing at near its potential. And so I think we need to break out of that, and I think we can. And that's why I just wanted to focus on these issues.
Let me expand this conversation, because we don't live in a vacuum here in America. There are some things happening in other parts of the world that I think make people a little edgy, a little nervous, whether it's what's happening with ISIS and Syria and parts of the Middle East, or whether it's what's happening in Greece right now.
Yeah.
Are we asserting ourselves forcefully enough in the world today?
No, but I don't know if that's the right way to phrase the question, asserting ourselves. I don't think we go, swashbuckling through the world trying to tell people, here's how things work. I think you need to be a very strong country, a very strong economy with a very strong military, asserting your principles and standing up for your beliefs and leading by example. And I don't think we're doing that. I think the president made big mistakes in Iraq, is about to make a big one in Afghanistan. I think his policy with respect to Iran and the Middle East, greater Middle East, has been terrible. And I think that is in part, not fully, but in part, given rise to the problems we're experiencing over there. We do not have a comprehensive strategy to deal with radical Islamic terrorism. We need a comprehensive strategy to deal with it. That's multi.
What should that strategy include?
Well, it should include working with moderate Muslim nations to work with us as partners. The Jordanians just stepped it up because of the pilot, but it also means having a comprehensive foreign policy, which we don't have one, particularly in this part of the region. It also means having a military that is not stretched too thin, and that's not the case right now. Our military is being stretched too thin. And if you look at the budgets the president's been proposing on the military over the years, they are not the kind of military you need for the kind of situation we have. And I don't think we've led with the kind of moral clarity we need to. Whether it was the Green Revolution years ago in Iran, whether it was the handling of Ukraine, or relieving the sanctions on Iran, then going and talking with Iran and allowing the delays to persist. I think we look weak. Giving up missile defense at the expense of our allies in Poland and the Czech Republic. I think it's
about Ukraine.
I think it's a foreign policy that makes us look weak and vacillating and reactive, not proactive. I think our friends in the Baltics who are in NATO, in the Eastern NATO, are very nervous. And so all of these things, I think we have this sort of lead from behind foreign policy, if you want to call it that I think makes us less safe. But more importantly, it's important for America to lead, because if we don't lead, other countries that do not share our values will lead. Trade is the one area where I think the president is finally breaking out and doing some good, whereas he was sort of doing nothing for a while. And the reason I talk about trade is the global economy is here, it's going to stay, and it's going to shape us. And so the question is are we leading and shaping the global economy, or is it being done to us? I mean, if America asserts itself and helps write the rules of the global economy so that it's individual rights, so that it's the rule of law, enforceable contracts, that is good for America. That's good for peace. It's good for democracy. It's good for individual human rights. But if we're sitting back and reacting, then other countries, China in Asia and Russia in Eastern Europe, they'll write the rules. And those rules won't be the rule of law, but the rule of the jungle. Those rules will be the rule of the powerful against the weak. That's not good for us or for society. So that is why I think we have a very weak foreign policy with a military that is being stretched too thin. We have the strongest military, bar none, but it is bursting at the seams. It's fraying at the seams, It's fraying at the seams. And I think we need to do more on that.
I'm going to open it up and take a few questions from the audience. We'll respect Congressman Ryan's time. Let's begin here. One of our students. Yes. If you can, hold down the rim, please. Just keep your finger on that. Ryan will find it for you. So there you go.
I'll just shove that.
There you go. That looks good.
You got it.
One thing that's been in the news a lot with Obama was the 2-year free technical college. And as a student, obviously student loan debt after law school, I'm going to have close to $200,000 in total debt.
You're here at law school?
I'm at Marquette Law School. I did my undergrad, though, at a public university. Do you have generally, what are your thoughts of
there's no
debt?
Yeah. First of all, there's no such thing as a free lunch or free anything. It sounds good, and I think it's meant to sound good. We just passed a bill I was very favorable toward that I worked on that I like, called the Skills Act, in the last session of Congress, at the end of the last year, which said we had 47 different job training programs spread across 9 different government agencies, federal money toward community college, toward lifelong learning, going back to school, and we just streamlined and consolidated them in a way that we can go back toward getting all the bureaucracy out of it, make it more outcome-based, run it through the states and through the person. And so we were in the middle of just implementing a brand new law aimed at improving access to community college, we call them technical schools here, and other forms of education. So why come up with some brand new entitlement when we're in the middle of actually trying to make a big difference here with job training? That's point one. Point two is just throwing more federal money just feeds tuition inflation. And there are a lot of studies. Richard Vedder at Ohio University has this, I forget this department that looks into it, I forgot what it's called, that has really linked tuition inflation with federal stimulus, with federal money, Pell Grants, and what ends up invariably happening is the federal government pushes money into this side and tuition goes up and the schools, pull it out. And so you have a inflation rate that is so much higher than any other inflation rate than ordinary inflation. Healthcare is up there too, but ordinary inflation. And I would argue in large part because it's sort of like an other people's money problem. You can't shop for value in education like you can for other things. Transparency on price, transparency on quality. What does this degree get me? What has the best placement rates? And the transparency on having academic institutions, most of which are nonprofit, be lean and tough and mean with your money. We don't have the kind of pressures that markets bring to bear in other areas of our economy that keep prices down. And those kinds of principles we need to inject in higher education so that we can get at the root cause of tuition inflation, which we're just feeding by pumping more federal money into it. And so all we'll end up doing in many cases is we'll subsidize people's loans, but we'll make you more in debt. So let's not do that. Let's get at tuition inflation, more competition, not less competition. One of the things I don't like the administration is they're trying to put out of business a lot of these for-profit education, or they have regulations that are making it harder for more competitors to enter the education field. And we want as much competition for our education as we can possibly get, so that these competitors, not just Marquette and Madison, but you name it, compete against each other for our businesses, students, based on price. And that's the kind of dynamic we want to launch and get. And that's not a partisan thing. It's just, it's a deficiency that we have right now because we have this high inflation rate. And the answer is not, in my opinion, spend more money, borrow or tax more to feed the system so you go even deeper into debt because your tuition's going like this, but we'll give you a subsidized loan. I mean, it might be good if you get the subsidized loan, but what about the person who doesn't get the subsidized loan? That's an issue I think we got to focus on before we just keep throwing money at these things.
Let me take other questions.
I'll let you just pick.
Yeah, I'll pick them out here. Okay. Let me go right back here in the middle, right there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, sir. Congressman, I'm curious about an issue that you haven't discussed yet tonight, and that is immigration reform, and the impact that whole issue has on our...
Yeah, it's a big one. I'll say,
yeah. No, it's,
We talked about this a bit. System's absolutely broken. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I think what the president did was not constitutional. I can go into the particulars of his deferred adjudication or prosecutorial discretion is what they utilize. But presidents are in the executive branch, and they don't write the laws. And what I think he's effectively trying to do is rewriting immigration law, which is what Congress is supposed to do. Now, Congress needs to get on with writing immigration laws. I've been pushing for this for years, and we have been, unfortunately, at impasses. But I think the best way, if you don't like, which I don't, the president's unconstitutional executive orders, the best way to stop these is to preempt them with congressionally written laws. And that, to me, is where we need to go to really fix this system. I can go on. I won't go on for 20 minutes on immigration. I mean, I've given pretty strong opinions about how to fix them, and I think, first of all, immigration is important for this country. It's very good for this. My name's Ryan. Most of us have an immigrant story, which is what this country's all about, and that's what makes this country successful. But we want to make sure that it works. We want to make sure that the rule of law is being respected. We want to make sure that our border is secure. In this day and age of ISIS and drug cartels, it's a real national security issue. And the laws we have that govern these things were written in the 80s that do not apply to the current day and age. They need to be rewritten so that they work. And unfortunately, we have not had, I would say, a good broker in the White House on this. I think he's more playing politics with this than anything. Those of us who talked to the president about this issue before his executive order said, don't do this executive order. Give this new Congress a chance to actually legislate. Work with us on legislating. We haven't even taken office yet. It was, and he gave us this executive order in December. I think it was more of a political thing than anything. And that, to me, is very irresponsible, not constitutional. And now we have this conflict where the Senate's had, I think, 3 votes on our bill that we try to defund his executive order. Well, the problem with this issue is the president has to sign that into law for it to actually occur, to stop his executive order. Well, you think he's going to do that? We can't even get it to his desk because you can filibuster it. So the Senate has shown 3 times over that they don't have the votes to break a filibuster, so we can't get a bill on his desk that we know he would veto anyway. And so now we're in this position of trying to figure out, how do you deal with this? And that's where we're going to, I think that's probably what your question is getting at, is where's Homeland Security going? The other problem with this issue is you can't defund something they're not doing, right? So the president says we're not going to deport people who are undocumented. So it's hard to defund a non-action. That's number one. Number two, this agency, Homeland Security, operates on a fee-funded basis. They get revenues from immigrants applying for green cards and visas, and then they use that money to run their operations. So it's not like appropriations from Congress can cut them off. But point 4 is, even if there's a government shutdown, even if there were to be a funding lapse at the Department of Homeland Security, which is what might happen, the president has the authority, and all presidents have exercised this, to deem certain government personnel and functions essential, and they always have Homeland Security, Border Patrol, and things like this. So even if funding lapses, it doesn't stop the executive order from continuing on. And so the problem with this, Mike, is it took me like 6 minutes to go through all of that. And I know people want a real quick answer. Are you going to stop it or not? Well, it's not that simple. I wish it were. I think the way to stop it is for Congress to actually do immigration reform, for Congress to actually, pass bills fixing this broken system. And that is what I'm hoping we can get to, but we got to get through this ugly political round we're in right now.
I've got 5 minutes left. What I'd like to do is make this a lightning round question. One really
That tells
quick
me
question.
give quick answers, right?
One really quick answer.
Stop talking to me.
6 minutes is good sometimes, but and we'll take this question and then we'll wrap things up.
Okay.
Yes.
So if the U.S. Supreme Court says that the federal subsidies on healthcare exchange cannot be given to states that did not adopt a state exchange, what will happen?
The ruling will come out between June and July. It takes probably 4 months for that to translate. So my guess is, I'm guessing this, the subsidies are good through this year. And then the states with federal exchanges like ours, they won't occur. We, Ways and Means Committee, which is in charge of this with a couple of other committees, are writing a contingency plan. And we're in the middle of developing it right now. And we will have a contingency plan for these 37 states, plus the District of Columbia, so that there is an answer to solving the problem that people will be experiencing who are going to be getting kicked off of the subsidies or off of Obamacare. We will have ready a contingency plan to deal with states so that people can get affordable health care. And that's what we will be advancing. If that happens, I think the court is going to go that way. It's kind of a binary choice, and the law is the law. And so I do think King will prevail. So we feel the need to have a plan in place and ready to act, and we will.
I'm going to wrap things up before we say thank you to Congressman
That wasn't
Ryan.
much of a light. Did I talk too much?
No, that was good. That was good. Two things. I want to let you know about a couple of upcoming On the Issues events. Next week, February 17th, we'll have Paul Taylor here. He is a fellow at Pew Research in Washington. He's written a book called The Next America about the looming generational showdown between boomers and millennials. It should be a really good hour, and we hope you'll join us. It'll be at our regular time, 12:15. Then on February 23rd, the Archbishop for the Milwaukee Archdiocese, Jerome Listecki, will be with us. So we want to say thank you to everyone who came here today at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We appreciate that. We appreciate your attention. Most of all, we appreciate Congressman Paul Ryan for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.